Morning, everyone. So yeah, I thought we'd have a little discussion of HS2. Now, I'm going to start off with a few things that's worth bearing in mind because so all right, okay. Let me show you what HS2 was supposed to be. This is as it was originally envisaged, right? So it was supposed to be high-speed rail capacity, linking up Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, and London. Three of the major cities and our metropolis, right? And right now, the plans right now, although Rishi Sunak is not saying exactly what those plans are, he's been a bit coy, but the reports are basically saying it's not going to link any of them up, right? We're going to have a line that goes from sort of Birmingham, but it doesn't actually go into the major train stations in Birmingham, to a place on the western, the 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 outer spiral arm of London, a place called Old Oak Common. I did a video on my own channel yesterday where I had a look at this place because I'd never heard of it, and it's smaller than the village I grew up in. I grew up in a mining village. The mining village, it's not a mining village anymore, of course, and it was the village I grew up in has a population 50% greater than this place. So then you think, so, okay, so we're going to get this high speed line going from somewhere in Birmingham that's not the main train stations to this place 6 miles out from the center of London, right? This tiny little place with a population of 9,000. You put a train on that line, who's going to ride it? Who's going to ride it? Because there are existing lines that will get you from Birmingham to London quicker. So you're not gonna, if you're trying to go from Birmingham to London, you're not gonna ride that train. If you're going from London to Birmingham, you're not gonna ride that train. The only people who are gonna ride that train are the people who want to travel from Old Oak Common to a bit of Birmingham that's not in the middle. That like you wouldn't even get one person a day on that train, would you? So it's like there's no point. And here's what I'll say is from the start, I have with HS2, like I have no firm view on whether the project is a good idea or not. If it had been done properly, honestly, no view, because what I have observed is ever since it was conceived, and it was conceived by Gordon Brown, there has always been a lot of people saying yes, this will be really good, but there's also been a lot of people saying it'd be really bad. The Institute for Fiscal Studies right now is doing its nut, right? And they've said it was always a terrible idea on a cost benefit basis. They have always said if you're going to spend this money, there are loads of things we could have done to improve the railway infrastructure. There are things you could spend the money on. And this is why I question now Labour's position, because what's happened is, so we're getting this situation where HS2, basically this original route, Leeds was chopped already. They'd already said, no, we're not going to go take it to Leeds, which means all of my part of the country, you could see it was supposed to go through, Nottingham, Derby, Chesterfield, Sheffield, up to Leeds. Gone. All that's gone. You say it's Labour's fault. It's not actually Labour's fault because although Labour conceived of it, they conceived of the plan a year before the election where they lost. So they had no part in it at all. David Cameron could have decided he didn't want it. He could have decided he didn't want it. He could have said, nah, this is just a vanity project. The reason it's believed that David Cameron supported it, so the Conservatives have had control of this from the start. Although Gordon Brown proposed it, Labour had no part whatsoever in it, in spending any of the money on it, other than the initial feasibility study. But the David Cameron, it's believed, supported it because he thought, well, it might help swallow the pill of austerity that we've got this major infrastructure coming. So because they were always constantly saying about green shoots. Oh, we need to deal with the economy, but green shoots, we're going to build it up. And how do you give confidence that you're going to do that? You do it with infrastructure projects that are going to boost the economy. But this has been the only infrastructure project, and it's basically now. So Leeds already gone. Although they won't admit it at the moment, the papers are freely reporting that Manchester's going to be gone. So all that other bit, and all that's going to be left is from part of Birmingham, not the main part, to part of London 6 miles away from the main part. So it's of no use to anyone. It'll be like 100 billion completely wasted. But from Labour's point of view, here's what I would say. So at the moment, Labour have said that the project should still go ahead. Now, you could think to yourself, well, is there a bit of a sunk cost fallacy here? Do they think, well, the money's been mostly spent anyway, and actually to finish it off wouldn't necessarily cost a great deal? The massive increase in the cost has been caused by inflation, but you'll always get that. If you have a project that's going to take 15, 20 years, of course, it's going to end up costing a lot more than you originally planned. Of course, it bloody is. You can't predict 20 years worth of inflation. But if you've got this, Labour are basically saying, look, let's just get it done. And the Conservatives now are accusing Starmer of U-turning because he very famously, before he was leader, argued that the whole project should be scrapped. He was part of a group of Labour MPs who produced a petition calling on the government just to say, just cut your losses, cut it. But there's another proposal that I saw I think it might have been in The Guardian, it might have been Simon Jenkins. He's someone who's very much against it. And he was suggesting, why don't we, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily in favour of this, but what I am saying at the moment is HS2 isn't getting built. So it doesn't matter whether you think HS2 is a good idea or not. And as I say, the IFS at the very least say that it's not the best use of money. Why not stop it? And then Starmer can say, I've always had this view. He can then look like a visionary because years ago, he said we should just scrap it. So now he can say, well, I've been proven right because you're not even going to finish it. Scrap it, sell the land that we've spent a bloody fortune on, recoup as much of the costs as we can, and then just basically get the mayors of like Birmingham, London, Leeds, and Manchester round and say, right, we've got this money to connect up, to improve transport links between your cities. What do you think is the best way of doing it? Or at least bring them on board with a working party on the best way to do it. Because then Starmer gets to push his idea of decisions being made more regionally as well. So set up a new working group when he's in power and just say, look, we're going to recoup the costs here because this is a absolute disaster area now. And have those regional mayors involved in a group that goes, what is the best way to actually improve our transport links between these places? And just spend it on that. But anyway, excuse me. Didn't Labour vote at election a few years ago to oppose any more austerity? It doesn't matter because Labour haven't won since austerity. Tories like big vanity projects that have easy scope to grift and have little interest in small but practical projects on tight budgets. There is a certain amount of truth in that because, as some people may know, some of the money was properly wasted. I'm sure it'll come as no surprise. For example, there was a scheme to compensate people whose houses might be somewhere near the line. Boris Johnson's father got to sell a house for over double what he originally paid for it. Now, that might have been market rate, doesn't really matter. But the point is, the reports were suggesting that he got to sell his house to the government using this scheme. No one on his street was allowed to, which is a bit suspicious. Andrew Bridgen, the former Conservative MP, who's now thrown his lot in with Lawrence Fox, he got to sell a house using the scheme as well. So there's been quite a lot of there will have been quite a lot of proper waste of this, like corrupt waste. And I don't just mean making sure the contracts go to your donors and mates. There'll be plenty of that as well. But there we go. High-speed barges. There's a canal from Birmingham to London. It might actually be quicker. It is an absolute madness, though. I don't understand. Like, either you've got to do this properly, or you scrap it and recoup the cost. It has to be one of those two. I don't see the point. There's no point in what it is now. Basically, if Sunak just leaves it as it is, the Tories, whenever we go to the polls, after 13 and a half or 14 years, whatever it happens to be, the only infrastructure they will have given us is a railway line that no one will ever use. Because I keep coming back to this. I'm not like I say, I don't have a firm view on whether HS2 as originally conceived was a good idea or not. Because I've seen far too many arguments for and against. And you know what? It's not my favorite topic. So I've not got into it in enough detail for me to have a firm view. I don't think I should have a firm view. But what I will say is the current situation right now is clearly ludicrous. A rail line that sort of goes from a bit of Birmingham to a bit of London that's slower than the existing lines that will get you from Birmingham to London. No one will use it. It's going to have cost 100 billion quid. 100 billion quid. Do I remember when HS2 was going to reach Scotland? No, to be honest, no. If that was ever a plan, I don't at all. Because it's not one of those things I paid careful attention to. I don't really travel much. Graham will pay far more attention to something like this than I do. I don't try. What I pay attention to is the political travesty of it, rather than because I'm not invested in it. I hardly ever get. And when I do get trains, do you know what? I'm still spitting feathers about how crap a station King's Cross is after I went to London on Saturday. It's a terrible station. I had a bad time getting out of it. I had a bad time getting into it. It's an absolutely awful station. I've seen better train stations on Thomas the Tank Engine. But anyway, HS2, a perfect Tory metaphor, 8 billion, billions spent, yeah, tens of billions, over 14 years with no public benefit whatsoever. Well, we're nothing. There's like nothing. We're not getting anything. HS, like, it's like, although, as I say, Rishi Sunak keeps talking, and Grant Shapps will talk about rephasing, which basically means, oh, yeah, we're not stopping it. We're just going to leave it for another government in years' time. No, you are stopping it. We're going to get, like, all of this is gone. Oh, no, you know, the Leeds was already gone. They already announced the Leeds bit, the east of the north of England is gone. Now the west is being reported to be gone, even though Sunak won't officially announce that. And you just, even if it were just a better line between Birmingham and London, that wouldn't be worth tens of billions. But you're not even getting that. It doesn't go into Birmingham properly, and it doesn't go into London properly. Like, you're just going to have a rail line in the middle of the country that like, it was supposed to join 4 cities. It's not actually going into any of them. It's not going into any of them. Graham's saying that I think they're making life as difficult as possible for when Labour take over, smash everything on the way out, like the Portuguese in Angola. There is an element of that. The problem I have with that sort of thinking is, first of all, you have the old never ascribe to malice that which may be explained by incompetence, and they're very incompetent. But secondly, that has to work on the basis that the Tories don't even want to win the next election, which is most unlike them. The Thames barrier problem will be next. Is that saying Parliament's prepared to move to higher land in Brum? Right. Parliament should definitely move. If you look at what it's going to cost to fix up the Palace of Westminster, it would be way cheaper. Basically, it would be cheaper to build a new Parliament in Doncaster, as I keep saying, obvious place to put it, and then save the money. Just let Westminster fall down. Goodness sake, save the money and use that to finish off HS2. If you're going to go for it, go for it. But I would just think, going back to the Labour's position. Now, Labour have just, I mean, admittedly, it was Jonathan Ashworth. I don't know why he was pronouncing on it rather than the Shadow Transport Secretary, Louise Hay. He was the one who, for some reason, did the interview rounds. Was it yesterday or the day before? I can't remember now. And but he's basically stated Labour's position, which is that they think the Conservatives should proceed with it, should go ahead with it. And I would just think, if it, like, why didn't they use the opportunity, given that it's finely balanced? Why didn't they just use the opportunity for Keir Starmer to say, look, I've been saying for years that this should be scrapped. Let's scrap it, recoup the costs, give the money, you know, get the regional, because Andy Burnham's saying that it would be a disaster if the Manchester line isn't done. But actually, if you said to Andy Burnham, Well, we're proposing on scrapping it, recouping the costs, and letting you, West Yorkshire Mayor, Mayor of Birmingham, Mayor of London, get round a table with some planners and work out a better way to spend the money. I'd be up for that. You're not going to tell me you wouldn't be up for that. Kurt, I was saying, wonder if Phil knows anything about trains and train lines and how much WCML needs upgrade for more trains and lines, because what he said so far is flawed. What I've said is, it will. No, I don't. But I'll tell you this: Are you telling me that going ahead with HS2, which at the moment doesn't include Leeds, doesn't include that Leeds arm, and is not going to include Manchester, are you telling me that is better than scrapping it, selling all the land, and using the money to make improvements to the existing rail network? Is that what you're going to tell me? Because I have to say, you can argue that with me, because no, I don't know enough about it, but I'll tell you something. The Institute for Fiscal Studies will call you stark raving mad. And as I say, my observation is throughout, there has always been a lot of opposition to HS2, even when it was going to be what it is proposed on this map here. Move Parliament and watch the associated rail lines improve. Well, yes. Well, the thing is, you look at it at the moment and you think, okay, I get that a lot of the people and therefore MPs are concentrated in the south of England. So for them, it's not that big a deal to get to London. Apart from the fact London is a terrible place. I'm sorry if you like London. It's a terrible place. I could spend half an hour banging on about how London was inferior to even like pissing Grimsby when I went on Saturday. There was a woman skiing in the park, for goodness sake. But anyway, that was the least of my issues. As a Brummie, I've always fancied getting to Old Oak Common a bit faster. Yeah, very good. I mean, that's all you'll be getting to. You'll get to Old Oak Common, and then what? You get a bus somewhere, or do you just stay there for a bit? Is there a nice corner shop? Is there a good chippy at Old Oak Common? Maybe there's a really good fish and chip shop. Then you can go back. So improvements to existing lines can't be done. Our current lines are at full capacity. Well, they're not. I know they're not because I travelled on one. Let me just have a little look here what the Institute of Fiscal Studies reckons you could do. He says you could make more rail connections across the north, which is what you're arguing for anyway. Build more bypasses, improve the roundabouts in the road network. So they're talking about you could improve the road as well as the rail network. I'll read the whole thing. So this is what the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies has said. This whole thing, it just makes me want to weep. It just makes me despair. I mean, the original sin, as it were agreeing to do it in the first place. It was obviously going to be hugely expensive with relatively little gain from it relative to pretty much everything else you could have done with the railway or transport system, whether that's making rail connections across the north vastly better or actually building a bunch of bypasses and improving the roundabouts in the road network. And we knew this was not the best way you could spend that amount of money. We also know how difficult we find it to build these projects. Now, the thing is, if you've got someone who 15 years ago was saying all this, how can you say they're wrong? Because we're not getting, we're not getting HS2. What we're getting is a line that goes from a bit of Birmingham to a bit of outer London. Like, who's going to argue that's worth 100 billion? That's what I keep coming down to. Who's going to argue that's going to be? Because here's the thing: what's Labour's plan? Labour is saying the Conservatives should do HS2. What do they mean by that? Because Labour could be in government in 2 months' time. I'm not saying that's necessarily likely, but it is possible that 2 months today, Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister, Louise Haigh is the Transport Secretary. So then it becomes their problem. What are they going to do? Are they going to commit to it? And if they commit to it, what are they going to commit to? What are they actually going to commit to? Are they going to commit to the original? How much extra is that going to cost? I just think if you've got people whose job it is to scrutinize value for public money being spent. And they are saying, not just that it's turned out badly, not just that, oh, on balance, it probably, or on hindsight, it would be better to do this. But if they've said from the start, we have said you can spend this money better, then why don't we just spend the money better? You say Wes Street in Health Secretary, dear God. Right, okay, he's not exactly my favourite person, but let us be honest, he'll be far superior to Stephen Barclay. Old Oak Common isn't far from QPR. Even as a fan, getting anyone to go to Loftus Road is cruel and unusual punishment. See, I couldn't say that myself. I don't know I don't know where anything is. I know that when I pass into London from Doncaster, I go past Arsenal Stadium. That's it. That's the only one I see. Will they not be connecting the line into the existing network at each end like a bypass? I think they will. You think they will? No. There was, you can see on the map, there's where it goes to Old Oak Common. There's then supposed to be, it's supposed to be picked up and taken into Euston. It's not doing. They're not doing it. Sunak basically, it's like Sunak wants to cancel the whole thing. What happened was Gordon Brown in 2019 thought, right, the polling was really bad. He looked like he was on for a loser, right? So he wanted some grand vision. So HS2, that was it. It wasn't necessarily well thought out. It just went that. David Cameron went, oh, yeah, we'll support this because that'll give people some faith that we're going to get the economy firing up again, right? But he wasn't it. And David Cameron, I mean, when we say like people like Boris Johnson have no focus, I mean, okay, David Cameron wasn't that bad, but he didn't focus on anything. He wasn't interested in being prime minister. So it just bumbled along. Liz Truss just said, yeah, we might as well. She didn't cancel it. So she said, yeah, whatever. Boris Johnson quite liked the idea because he wanted the idea of this legacy of a big infrastructure project. Remember, he is the guy who wanted to build a load of underground rail links between Britain and Ireland with a massive underground roundabout underneath the Isle of Man, right? Basically the Channel Tunnel on crack. Probably what happens when you get Michael Gove to actually look at the plans. But yeah, Boris Johnson would have been genuinely supportive of it. But again, no focus. He didn't make sure anything was done on it. And Rishi Sunak doesn't like spending on anything. You know, he's the one who cancelled the Leeds arm. So he doesn't like spending public money at all. He's rich, fabulously rich. He just wants the government to let him carry on making pots of money. You know, Rishi Sunak is someone who doesn't see the value in any public spending, really. I mean, he's a guy who, you know, basically paid for the national grid to send another line to his house who could heat his swim pool. So from his point of view, he pays for his own infrastructure anyway, I suppose. So he doesn't really want to spend anything. The best part of HS2 is the archaeology. It's been spectacular. Yeah, ecologists have not been so happy, though, have they? Ecologists have not been at all happy. Someone on James O'Brien yesterday blamed Labour for the HS2 mess. I think the only way you can blame Labour for the HS2 mess was in the fact that they allowed the Conservatives to win elections. They didn't take elections seriously enough over the last 15 years. That is the only way you can blame Labour for it, for actually letting the Tories have such an easy run in these elections. Would have been better to take HS2 from St Pancras so it would connect with Eurostar. Well, do you know what? Yeah, right. Here's another thing. Yes. Again, I know it has also been criticised, even in terms of the original proposed route, that it did not include things like access to the continent. Indeed, yes, that's a very good point. There's so much it could, but then could you argue? I don't know. Could you argue it could have been built upon if we'd have actually done HS2 as it was supposed to be? Could you have extended it then later on? I mean, you wouldn't just leave that as, okay, that's our high-speed rail too. You know, presumably it could have been expanded. But it's an absolute mess. And also, it's not even like, we call it high speed, you know, which is a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? Because it was supposed to be just for extra capacity. It's not actually that much faster, even if it was built as proposed, I gather. Gary's saying, let's face it, he's leaving as soon as he loses the election. Yes, I absolutely. He's not going to be like Ted Heath, chuntering on the back benches. No, Rishi Sunak will be resigning as an MP very shortly after losing the election, I'm quite sure. Phil, have I been or used the Birmingham New Street on a normal day? It's run at 120%. With some days it runs at 140%. No. Whenever I've been to Birmingham, I've driven. I just won't drive into London. So I get the train to London. But I would drive to Birmingham. Wishy-washy Sunak may not like spending money, but he sure as hell does love accumulating for himself, his family, his wealthy peers. That QA library, that comment about the Birmingham thing, though, if you're trying to suggest that is a benefit to HS2, though, that's not going to improve, is it? It's not actually going to improve with this, because this doesn't go into Birmingham. It doesn't link up with the main train stations of Birmingham, does it? So it's not actually improving. It's not expanding that capacity. You have to, Xavier's saying, you have to double down, make the plan to take it all the way to Scotland, be brave. It could be brave. What would be the cost, though? Because at the moment we have a problem. I mean, we've got two problems with HS2. First of all is the argument about, is it the best way to spend money? Because it's not about, again, maybe some people are thinking that because HS2 would, if it was done properly, would technically be an improvement, therefore we should do it. And it's like, okay, but it's not a case of whether, it's not a case of either you can have the money for HS2 or nothing. If the money is going to be spent anyway, in fact, the money has been spent, it could have been spent on something else. If the money was going to be committed to transport improvements, the argument is, are there better ways to do it? But we've got a second problem now. It's not just a value for money argument, because the value for money is obviously obscene now. It's getting the money at all. You know, now there's going to be, because I'll tell you something else. If every time you look at the news, the economic news now, I actually, although I still don't think that Rishi Sunak's going to call an election on the balance of probability, I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's like 1% chance. I keep thinking that there's a higher and higher chance that Sunak might call an election. And the latest piece of economic news is that if Labour have to form a government now, they're going to struggle to get the economy firing quickly because world trade is being depressed. And that is, you know, because although inflation is lower in some parts of the country, it's still high in a lot of them because not enough countries did what Spain did and just make sure that the prices came down to reduce inflation. So there's people aren't buying as much across the world, which means you're going to struggle to export. So we're going to, you know, next year is going to be a really tough year economically. So where do you get the money? Like, I don't think, this is why I think Labour are getting themselves into a bit of a trap, or they might be. I don't know what they're planning because they're not saying any more than Sunak what they would do. But if Labour come in and say we're committed to HS2, I'll tell you something. People on the east side of this will be expecting that Leeds line to be resurrected. Are they going to do that? Are they going to do that? But anyway, Graves just reminded people there to hit the like button, please. It's also reminded us. So at the Labour social event, which I think there'll still be a link in the description below for tickets if you want those. So in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks yesterday, there's going to be a fringe event in Liverpool at the Camp and Furnace, where a group of people are going to be discussing social media. Marina Perkis is going to be there for that as well as Femi, Tan, Graham, and myself. And then there's going to be another similar event, but within the Labour conference. So you only be able to see that if you had tickets. That is 2 weeks today. Any other little reminders? Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, of course, but we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. It's quite interesting. I'll go to Jez's last one because I'm missing a point. You're missing, but actually having a functional train line isn't the important thing. The important thing is a lot of Tory consultants and Tory donor companies made an awful lot of money. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I did forget that part. But then they'd carry on making money if it continued. Like just this scrapping, it stops them making money, though, doesn't it? It doesn't work either way. This doesn't work. This is really, if you think about the legacy of the, I'll leave you with this last thought. If you think about the legacy of the Tories, right? The Tories are going to lose the next election. So their legacy is now decided. What's their legacy going to be? HS2, which was supposed to link up 4 major cities, is not going to link up any cities at all. And the COVID inquiry is going to absolutely destroy their credibility for governance in an emergency as well. That's how I see their legacy. And Brexit, well done. You've destroyed our ability in a global downturn to actually recover our economy. Excellent. Thank you very much. But there we go. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Have a very good day. And until next time, I'll see you later.